horrifying violence unfolded on the borders of Assam and Mizoram yesterday. Violence that left 5 people dead. Violence that left 5 policemen dead at the Assam-Mizoram border. And after that, what followed was an ugly political war of words, where in a very unprecedented way, we saw chief ministers of 2 states blaming each other. Chief ministers of 2 states tweeting videos and blaming the other side for what was taking place, asking the other side to show restraint. Chief ministers of 2 states who belong to political parties who are effectively part of the same NDA alliance, not even, in a sense, opposition. And on ground, stones were being pelted, there was arson, there was firing, ugly clashes that unfolded in this specific area that you just saw. Now, this Assam-Mizoram border row, viewers, is not new. But the fact that even in 2021, over land disputes, 2 Indian states will indulge into this kind of violence, including men of uniform and civilians, is just very, very disturbing. The fact that the 2 states and their governments and their police cannot get together and pull back and actually continue to fight and blame each other is extremely disturbing. This dispute dates the colonial era, yes, and the border isn't clearly demarcated. So there is a disagreement on where the border line really is. And when you have hills and forests and mountains and rivers, there is actually no white line that becomes the border line. And so disputes take place. But this is completely unacceptable. We are not fighting with another country. These are 2 states coming to blows with each other inside our own country. Now, over the next 30 minutes, we're going to give you a background to this. But let me just tell you what has happened in the last 1.5 months. The recent tension and clash actually got triggered with something that took place first on June 30th, when Mizoram turned around and said that the Assam is encroaching our land in Kolasib. This was the allegation that was made by the Mizoram government at that point of time. The Assam government turned around and said, no, you are the guys who are actually encroaching, that it's the Mizoram side that's planting saplings in our territory. And so the Assam Police moved in to take control of that area, which is, in a sense, disputed area. They have been facing resistance by the locals there from Mizoram. The police, at one point, the officials were forced to turn back. Discussions were held to try and find a solution between the 2 states. But nothing helped. On July 10th, then, Assam allegedly held an anti-encroachment drive in this area, the area of Kolasib district. Assam held an anti-encroachment drive, which obviously triggered more tension. Now, people there say that this area belongs to Mizo farmers and that their crops got damaged because of this anti-encroachment drive. That is where trouble really began. And a couple of days ago, we had reports coming in that huts belonging to Mizo farmers were burned down, and then unfolded the violence where 5 policemen of Assam were killed. All of this in the backdrop of the fact that the Home Minister of this country just held a meeting with the Chief Ministers of Northeast 2 days ago. Mr. Amit Shah met the Chief Ministers of Northeast just 2 days ago to talk about working together, to talk about development and various issues that plague. And 2 days later, this takes place. So let's talk about it a little, put it in perspective for our viewers. Dr. Rajdeep Roy, MP for Lok Sabha from Silchar, joins me this evening. Adam Sapringsanga, the editor for the Frontier Dispatch, with me this evening. Francis Silo, president of the Mizo Reform Movement, joining me this evening as well. Mr. Javed Ansari, senior journalist, with me this evening as well. Let me first go across to Dr. Rajdeep Roy. And Dr. Roy, how is it that the two state governments and the police departments are unable to resolve this issue and it turns murderous?
Good evening, Tanvi. I have been listening very carefully to what you have said. You have said the right things and tried to put it in the right perspective. The only thing that you have not mentioned is that the Mizos who were actually cultivating were actually all people of Assam side. For ages together, they have been voting in the Assam elections, and for ages, they have been governed by the rules of the Assam state government. What actually Mizoram police did, is that they started claiming any land where the Mizos were settled as their own land and all, which is actually not true. Now, there has been a bigger issue since the past and all. What is that issue? The issue is the border has been not demarcated since the days of the creation of Mizoram. And the problem is same with all the other three states that were actually carved out of Assam. Since the last 70 years, Assam is having border issues with Arunachal Pradesh, with Meghalaya, with Mizoram, with Nagaland, and there is also a border dispute between Nagaland and Manipur, as you are aware of. I'm not going into the blame game, but the fact remains that the subsequent government in Northeast for over the last 70 years has not done anything to put everything to rest as of now. Our government has come in Assam, it is only 5 years, and Dr. Himanta Biswa Sarma has formed the government is just 50 to 60 days now and all. So in between this, when the problem started since April of 2020, it is 14 odd months and all, the government, specifically the central government, has undertaken a lot of meeting under the MHA, under the leadership of Joint Secretary Home or even the Secretary Home. Multiple level meeting has already taken place. The resolutions were signed by the DGP and the Chief Secretary Assam, agreed upon by the central government, but not signed by the Mizoram police because they claim that these land are there. So that is the bone of contention. But having said that, Assam being a state of 3 crore 30 lakhs, Mizoram being a population of only 11 lakh population, lesser than my Lok Sabha constituency, rather half my Lok Sabha constituency, I still presume that Assam and Mizoram should sit together, agree to a policy, agree to a borderline, and agree to it that this is executed by both the parties and not all of a sudden incessantly when the two deputy commissioner and the two SPs of the neighboring district, Kachar on my side and Kolasib on Mizoram side, when the four people, the two DCs and the two SPs were discussing, all of a sudden fire started coming. They started firing. And you have seen those videos, you have already put those videos up and all. Ask anyone from the Mizoram side, why did this happen? Are they trying to kill their own DCs and SPs at Kolasib who came to have talks with the counterpart from Kachar? I fail to understand this from the Mizoram side and all. And
so, Dr. Roy, let me ask you this question. You say that these people, the farmers, the Mizo farmers, have been, considered as part of Assam and living in Assam for decades now. They even vote in Assam, but it is now that the Mizoram police says because they are from Mizoram, that part is ours, and that territory also belongs to Mizoram. But in the day, the Chief Minister of Assam also said that this is about encroachment, that they are encroaching our land, our forest land. This is our forest land that they are encroaching. If the center tells me, then we will give it away, but the center needs to tell us that. So what is the core issue here? Is it the land? Is it the forest? Is it the people that the two states are fighting for?
And I am least bothered about the people there who if they want to go to Mizoram, so let them go. I don't have any problem. But any forest land should not be going to Mizoram. Assam also has its own forest, and all hills that you see around my place are not Lushai hills So you cannot claim all the hills to be Lushai Hills. And interestingly, the Lushai Hills has not been defined since ages. Lushai Hills is a gray zone, and the demarcation has not been done since the creation of the Mizoram state. So therein lies the problem. And why will you take the forest land and make people, the Mizo settle, do a deforestation and do zoom cultivation there? What is the logic behind that? Please tell me. And how can on land, any land, say suppose if Mizo people are settled in Delhi, will the Mizoram Chief Minister send army to claim Delhi as a part of Mizoram? Is it like that?
Like you also said, Dr. Rajdeep Roy, that the fact is that the Assam's borders are unclear. Ever since all of these states were carved out from Arunachal to Meghalaya and Mizoram, there have been lots of border disputes and it's all extremely unclear. Let me ask Francis Silo, president of the Mizo Reform Movement. Francis,
yes.
What is the Mizoram side of the story, and why can't we sit across the table and discuss it when with the other state rather than having bloodshed on ground?
Thank you. First of all, I am also, apart from the president of the Mizoram Reform Movement, I am a member of the Joint Action Committee on Inner Line Reserve Demand, Forest Demand. Okay, that is the bone of contention which we're talking over here. See, Dr. Rajdeep Roy has said a few things regarding the incident. Okay, so I'll not go back to that. The dispute goes back to the British Raj. The boundary between the present-day Assam and Mizoram dates back to the colonial era, where inner lines were demarcated according to the British administrative needs. Okay, the issue could not be settled after the independence, and till now we are having a problem in this issue. Okay, so the main problem is that this Assam government follows the 1933 demarcation. Okay, that is the point of conflict. Whereas the Mizoram argues that the area should be demarcated on the basis of 1875 notification, which is derived from the Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulation, BEFR Act of 1873. So, and as of now, the true state doesn't have a clear demarcated constitutional boundary. Okay, so that is the problem. So, and when you're talking about that forest area, 509 square miles of the Lusai country, which is under the which was that time under the district council. Okay, was declared by the government of India Act on 6 September 1895. It would just at the time it was under Lusai district hills. Okay, and those forests. Reserve area has to be looked after by a forest department. At that time, Lusai District Hills doesn't have a forest department, and it was under the Assam government, which was having the forest department. We have a document here which clearly shows that the forest reserve revenue collected in forest reserve has to go to the district council, which is this notice is from the government of some tribal areas department.
Right.
From Sri R.V. Subramaniam, IAS, Secretary to the Government of Assam, Tribal Area Development. Okay, so and over here you can see the green map, the darker green inner line is this Mizoram inner line, and the outer line is that Assam, which is now this whole area is which we call the 509 square miles, which is the inner line reserve forest. Okay. So this is the Assam government has to give back this inner line reserve forest to the Mizoram government.
So you're saying that is the disputed area that you believe the Assam government needs to give back to Mizoram and as part of the Mizoram forest. I have two more panelists I need to go to, but Dr. Roy, quick response from you and then to the other two panelists. Yes.
No. The country was divided in 1947. If you are talking of a map which existed in 1870s, will I go and now claim Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh to be my own territory? What are these Mizo people talking about? The government is ruled by the constitution of the country, which was framed in 1940 after 47 in the 50s. Now you talk of something which has happened post 47. You are talking of something which has happened 150 years back. How is this actually relevant in modern day? How is it actually relevant in modern day?
Well,
If I claim that
disputes that date
Afghanistan
back
and
that
Bangladesh
long.
to be part of India.
Disputes that date back that long really open, leave it open-ended in terms of interpretation of
you should understand, Tanvi.
Yes.
Tanvi, you should understand a basic difference. Mizoram and Lushai Hills are not synonymous. You should understand, Tanvi, one important thing. Lushai Hills and Mizoram are not synonymous. Lushai Hills existed from before. Mizoram was created in the early 70s. So
Okay.
there is a difference between Mizoram and Lushai Hills. Please have to acknowledge this fact. And we are talking of maps which should be post 47.
Okay, let me, if I can just bring in Adam to put in some perspective
Madam,
as well. Francis, I'll come back to you. Allow me to just go to two of our other experts and I will come back to you. Adam, just to put in perspective for our national audience as well, a dispute that perhaps dates back to 1875 and how at that point certain borders and lines were drawn. And then has kept coming back every 50 or so years and seen multiple rounds of violence in the last 30 years. Where do we stand? Is there really no solution that is in sight?
No, there is a solution. It's just that I feel we're very far from it yet, because as far as I understand, there hasn't been any proper demarcation on ground of the actual borders. There are competing claims. That is one thing. And also, in recent incidents, what unfortunately leads to all of these incidents is actually that I think there is a lack of communication between the two sides. For example, if one side wants to inspect or see that there is something happening in a particular area, I suppose the decent thing, apart from what should be done, I suppose the decent thing would be to get tell the other side that this is what we want to look at. Why don't we do a joint inspection of this area? There will be these officials coming from our side who will be coming from yours. I think that would be the decent thing to do. But over the past few years, that just doesn't really happen. It's becoming this, almost a cat and mouse kind of game between the two state administrations. And I think that's very unfortunate. And that doesn't really help in calming down tensions. It doesn't really help in, the locals who are actually living in those areas to have any confidence on the other side. That is definitely, at least from what I'm hearing from the ground and from officials, that is a major point of discontent.
Okay, if I can bring in Mr. Javed Ansari as well. Mr. Javed Ansari, like Adam is pointing out, there may be a solution. We are far away from it. There's just a lot of communication gap. One would think with NDA in power, at least the NDA allies in two different states should be able to sit across the table, have a conversation. But what has actually happened is extremely surprising in that sense. Just 2 days ago, the Home Minister held a meeting with all the state chief ministers, and 2 days later, two state chief ministers are fighting like teenagers on social media.
Not like teenagers, but when I first read and heard of this incident, I thought an incident had taken place on the international border. Because in the 40 years that I've been a journalist, and in all these years now, I've never heard, this is unprecedented, I've never heard or read of armed policemen of one state opening fire on another. This happens on the international border. This is not a border dispute, this is a boundary dispute. Successive governments should have ensured, and herein lies the failure of successive central governments, when there is a dispute which obviously cannot be settled between the leaders of the two states, allow the Supreme Court to adjudicate, and once the Supreme Court adjudicates in time-bound manner, it should be acceptable to everybody. You just can't wish away these problems, that allow these problems to fester and hope that with the passage of time, people will come to realize and things will resolve on them by themselves. It doesn't happen. We've seen in the past it never happens, and it's not going to happen in the future. The Supreme Court, this issue, either the center should enforce it or get the Supreme Court to adjudicate and then ensure that both sides accept whatever has been decided by the Supreme Court. And what were the deputy commissioners doing? I was told on another program by a senior police officer that there are two deputy commissioners tasked with the job of trying to resolve this issue. What were they doing? Isn't there a buffer zone in this contentious area where the CRPF is supposed to have set up camp and where the CRPF keeps the two sides at bay? What happened? Was the CRPF picnicking? Where was it? The Union Home Minister, the all-powerful Union Home Minister, asserted 2 days ago after this meeting of Northeast chief ministers that there will be an end to friction, that there will never be any fighting. And now we hear this, and suddenly everybody wants to pretend that everything is hunky-dory. This is happening within handshaking distance of the international border. Do we recognize and appreciate this kind of the sensitivities involved? We need leaders who will deal with this issue. There's something called statecraft. You need to practice statecraft rather than, just look at your own vote bank, look at the interests of your own particular state. If the state leaders can't do it, the center should do it. Imagine a situation, Tanvi, where this dispute had happened between West Bengal and Assam, and where the West Bengal police had opened fire on Assam. Do you realize? I mean, can you visualize the kind of political repercussions? Or if there is a dispute, long-standing dispute between Karnataka and Maharashtra. If the Maharashtra police, Maharashtra, which is now ruled by the opposition, if they had opened fire on Karnataka police, what would have been the kind of repercussions? I mean, two NDA-ruled states are fighting.
Yeah.
And whether it's NDA or non-NDA, I mean, two states of the Indian Union opening fire on each other.
Yes.
They shouldn't be going to war. I mean, this is shameful.
So the point that you made, and before I take it across back to the BJP MP that we have from Assam, I just want to bring in Adam on this. Adam, what explains the fact when you see armed police of one state opening fire at the civilians of the other state? Now, what really transpired on those few hours that led to that situation?
There are claims and counterclaims of that. What I can say confidently from what I have been hearing, I mean, at least what people here, officials here have been saying, is that they're very confident that Mizoram was not the first to fire first, that the first volley came from Assam. But, Tanvi, actually, I don't want to get too much into that. I think one of the major issues, and I think I want to take it from Mr. Ansari, is that there was a buffer zone. The central paramilitary forces were supposed to keep these two state police forces at bay. That buffer zone was definitely breached. I think it was breached by at least a good 100 to 200 meters. And this is where all of those incidents that you're seeing on the screen happened. How was that allowed to happen is the question that I think needs to be answered. If that is not answered, then it's going to set a very bad precedence.
Okay. Dr. Rajdeep Roy, can you shed some light on this? The buffer zone, and where was the CRPF when all this was happening?
Look, CRPF has only landed up after the incident has happened yesterday evening. There was pushing back from both the sides happening between 11 o'clock in the morning yesterday till 4:30, when all of a sudden you can see a video where at the border, where under a tree, the two DCs and the two SPs were sitting, and they were having a talk that you also push back, we will also push back. When they were coming to some sort of agreement, all of a sudden from the backside, I will get to the nitty-gritties of things. The SP of Silchar, Mr. Nimbalkar, had a wound on his backside, which was fired at his left buttock almost, hitting his hip joint. The bullet entered from his backside, lodged into his hip joint, and did not have an exit wound, which means that he was hit from the backside. Mr. Nimbalkar, an IPS officer and SP of Kachar district of my district. So when the two DCs and the two SPs were talking, this was happening. Now please tell me, where is the logic? There was no buffer zone at that point of time. Mizoram has always been posting their outpost just on the border of the state, on the state border. And this has been happening since 70s. What Assam has been doing categorically is that we are putting our outpost around, say, 2 to 3 kilometers, in some places 10 kilometers inside our border. So from the outpost, the Assam-Mizoram border is 10 kilometers away or 5 kilometers away. But for Mizoram, in entire Mizoram border, 160 odd kilometers, the Mizo outposts are exactly on the border. So for them, advancing into the Assam territory is actually not a problem. It is, in fact, it is the easiest thing to do. And I was telling you something else. I am, despite having all these, I am still telling you, BJP government at the center, and I have spoken to the DGP of Assam today in the afternoon, and I am sure there is a meeting called by MHA tomorrow in the evening under the chairmanship of the Home Secretary, and I presume the two DGPs and the two chief secretaries will go. I would like to bring your attention to the previous meeting that happened. The unsigned papers of the resolution from the Mizoram side needs to be taken into account. Why did the DGP and the Chief Secretary of Mizoram did not sign on the resolution or on the minutes of those meetings? These has to be answered. Having said that, I will please reiterate for the viewers that our Home Minister was there in Shillong just 2 days back, and he has said that all the border disputes of Northeast, I am not going into a blame game. Who created it? 4 states created out of Assam in the last 50 years. Not a single dispute made. And plus, there is a Nagaland-Manipur dispute. And he said categorically, before 2024, we should need to put all the border dispute. Otherwise, we cannot have a activist policy actively getting implemented in Northeast, because we want to open our borders for future trade and commerce with the Southeast Asian countries. We are actually taking a regressive step because of all this. My government at the center is absolutely focused on getting all the border dispute complete by 2024.
But Dr. Roy, your government at the center has been there since 2014. And look at the state of affairs. None of the border disputes with any of the states are even going beyond a very, DC or local state level. It needs to be done at the central level. Otherwise, I don't think this is going to be resolved. I mean, Francis, would you have, I don't have any hope from 2 states simply sitting and discussing it. It probably either needs judicial intervention or central government intervention to resolve this issue.
Yes.
So you basically need an ombudsman to...
Dr. Roy, let me just take that point across to... Let me take that point across to Francis Silo, please. Yes.
Yes, this issue has to be resolved under the Ministry of Home Ministry, Government of India. So this will be, prolonged as long as there is if the Assam government is not complying to what the status quo is maintaining, then there will always be an issue. Okay. So as Dr. Roy said, that there was a meeting between the CMs of the state and under the Union Home Minister, and just 1 or 2 days after that, Assam Police has again encroached the Mizoram land. In that process, they overrun a buffer zone maintained by the central CRPF force, which was around 20 personnel. Okay, that was that happened, so I will not delve into that. I will say that there is no clear-cut boundary, demarcated boundary between the two states, and if Dr. Roy...
But Mr. Silo, these are new encroachments, you would agree? The new hutments that have been created, people who've moved in there to set up this, which is what the Assam side seems to be removing now? Or are you saying that these huts have been there for a while, for decades now, and the Assam Police is only removing them now?
Yes, this has been our land since the day of the British Raj. Okay, so I will say that the survey of India has a map, and that was published in 1956, published under the Survey General of India. So that under that map, those areas belong to Mizoram. So I don't know whether this has been changed or not. But as to my knowledge, this map by the Survey General of India is still standing.
Okay, I am a little out of time now, so I'm going to thank all of the panelists for joining us. Quick comment again from Mr. Ansari before I wrap this up, Mr. Ansari. It really boils down to the central government getting a handle on these things. Assam doesn't just have problems with Mizoram. But in the past, there have been conflicts and violent conflicts with Arunachal and Nagaland as well on similar issues.
Yes, there's only two ways of resolving this. I mean, three ways. Either the states do it amongst themselves, which they wish they haven't, and there's no sign that they will be able to do it. And so either the center intervenes and gets this done, or the Supreme Court adjudicates, and the center makes sure, and the center then ensures that this the Supreme Court verdict is accepted. Because there is no other way. It's a very sensitive area within handshaking distance of our international and a very volatile border at the moment. We can't have states of the union going to war with each other, apart from everything else. And state chief ministers, state governments need to act and react with great sensitivity, with great circumspection, not as, for God's sake, leave the politics and the vote banks to one side.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think what was very, very disappointing is the way the two state chief ministers had to resort to Twitter and a public platform. It just gave you a sense of how communication lines had completely broken down between the two sides or with the center as well. Now, they kept tagging the center, they kept tagging PMO, they kept tagging the Home Ministers to say, please intervene, resolve this issue. On ground, though, violence was just getting worse. On ground, there was firing, stone pelting, there was arson, leading to loss of lives. All because two neighboring states cannot agree on a border or a boundary line between them, and if a part of the forest belongs to this side or that side, and thereby what happens on part of that forest, whether it belongs to this side and that side. That is just one simple way of looking at it. Obviously, there are many, many nuances dating back to the 1890s, but the fact of the matter remains that it is high time that we resolve these issues. In 2021, we cannot be affording to lose lives over a border issue within our country, not even with any of our neighboring countries. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.